You should have it now, Johnny.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So good morning, everyone, and I hope you all had a really good break last week. I think most of you are on vacation, so that's amazing. I'm jealous already, right? So and now you're coming back for a watch, so amazing. Um, so my name is Johnny, as Vikas mentioned. I'm based in Melbourne. I'm honored to have this opportunity to spend some time here with you guys. Right. I'm going to switch off my video shortly just to conserve bandwidth. Right. But here I am. I look a bit different from the picture. I call it my COVID hairstyle because everything's closed here in Melbourne until recently. So I'm going to get that sorted when I get in line for a haircut. So let me stop my video and talk through my slide. Right, so if you have question, quickly housekeeping, right? If you have question, please put it in the Q&A, and then either my colleague or I will address it later on. I'll try to leave more time for us to do Q&A. I'm sure a lot of you will have question, right? But again, let's get started. Right, so I'm here today to talk about this location agnostic security, especially with regards to workforce, right? You see, if you scan this QR, it's not malicious, but you can try. Right, it takes you to my LinkedIn profile, so feel free to connect to me. And also that's my email and contact. Right. All right, so I say workforce today, but before I dive into workforce today, let's look at how we get here today, right? So back in the days, you would have data center and then you would have branches, right? Branch 1, branch 2, branch N, right? So multiple branch, right? And then of course you have to connect all those branches because your users will be there. Some users are sit lost in the data center, maybe that's your head office, right? So you would have this MPLS link or some private link to connect the user to your services. Right, then of course comes internet services, like all these Salesforce or anything that you need to consume from the internet. So then you link up your data center to the internet, right? And then of course because it's linked to the internet, you then have to provision security, right? For outbound security, for inbound security in case you have people working from home, they want to connect to the environment, right? So they would then establish VPN into that particular environment. So if you look at this sort of topology, the perimeter of trust, where do you think it is? Right? Remember back in the days we have trusted and untrust, and then DMZ. That's a thing, right? Back in the days. Everything inside here is trusted. So the perimeter of trust is rather huge, right? And then there's a proliferation of all these SaaS services, PaaS, SaaS, right? And then what happened next? You say, okay, instead of having the users from branches tromboning to the data center out to the internet, let's go direct, right? So that's where the direct initiative is. That's where SD-WAN come in play, right? Like SD-WAN then say, okay, let's have a direct breakout and then let's do the routing for any SaaS PaaS services to go direct. Right, of course, if you were to think to go direct now, you need to kind of secure that perimeter as well because now your users are going direct, right? So you then establish the perimeter security. Again, you now have this micro segment of this so-called branch segment of security that you establish, right? And then what happened next? With COVID especially, right? We're pushing more and more users are working from home or remotely or anywhere, right? And then they access the environment through any sort of device, right? Sometimes they use BYO, sometimes they use corporate issue laptop, like me, I use my own iPhone, my iPad to access corporate email, right? And then of course, once you have, you have to grant them access, right? So how do you grant them access? Like especially for corporate services, maybe you have to use VPN. Right, and that becomes quite a bit of a challenge because this notion of trust everything after you establish VPN is definitely very weak. I think all of us must have read a lot of news about all these problem when you establish VPN, right? And then you have web services. Of course, when you expose yourself to the internet, right, you would have fraudster, you would have threat actor, you have bots hitting your website, right? So all these are to be expected, right? So we have, we have heard people say, well, back in the days when it's just internal, the bandwidth that we consume, let's say it's only 100 megabit, right? Once you open up to the internet, it becomes triple or 10 times more, right? That's to be expected, because the moment you go online, right, you expose yourself to multiple threat and multiple attack vector. Right, but now, since the users are working remotely now, if you're going to provision that everyone's working remotely, the need for IPVP and MPLS becomes less and less prevalent, right? It's like, why do you need it now? Might as well, just, just use the internet, just use the broadband, right? And then, do you really need a branch anymore, right? Maybe every branch is a satellite. So this is what Akamai did a couple of years ago. We say, okay, we have branches all over the world, right? And we say we're gonna establish that everyone's laptop, everyone's working device is actually a satellite office. So my laptop is actually a satellite office. So we do that by having a perimeter security that the user can use, right? So let's look into Sassy before we go into that concept, right? So what is Sassy, right? I'm sorry if you guys already know this. This is a slide. This is a diagram coming from Gartner, right? So Sassy is actually, according to Gartner, right, it delivers a converged network and security service from a single globally distributed cloud native platform, right? So that's what Sassy is, right? In a nutshell, right? If you look at this diagram on the right, it's a convergence of network technology, right? You have your SD-WAN, your carrier, your CDN, your WAN-op, your network as a service, and then you have your security service like CASB, SWIG, Zero Trust, web, application as a service, all these RBI converge into one so-called edge service in the cloud, right? So that's what Sassy is, according to Gartner. So this is a term coined by Gartner, right? So this is their definition. So what it means to our example simply means that now all these perimeter service, right, should be out to the internet on the edge, right? So on the edge means closest to the user, right? So everything you do, for example, back in the days, you buy firewall, right? You have hardware that should be in the edge as a service. You can consume it. It's elastic. It should scale automatically. You don't have to worry about how much CPU to allocate, how much rack space, right? It's just in the cloud, right? So that is Sassy, right? That's a Sassy framework. So what is edge to Akamai, right? So for those of you who's familiar, that's great, right? So if you look at this example here, right, this diagram here, right, so that's your data center. You probably have a few data center, right? And then you have maybe used services from AWS, Azure, GCP for their platform as a service, right? So you publish your service from multiple locations, right? What edge is really a larger network that sits closest to the user's touch point, right? Eyeball, we like to call it eyeballs, right? So it's closest to the eyeball, right? We generate a stats in the past, right? In most of the metro city, right? So if you go to any service that's hosted by Akamai, you do a trace route, you'll find that we are normally one hop away from your home, right? So if you know in any site that use Akamai, do a trace route to it, you'll see that the first hop lands on Akamai. That's the touch point. So what's our presence like? We have about 355,000 edge servers in the internet today. More locally within India, I just pulled out these stats today before the session, this morning, actually my morning. Right, we have 25,000 servers within India itself in 320 locations. So that's a lot of location, a lot of servers, right, to serve the users there. So that's our definition of edge, right? So every function are moving to the edge, and we've been doing this since the inception of Akamai, right? So if I dive into one of the pillar of Sassy, right, which is the zero trust, right? So there are three key components when it comes to zero trust, right? The first being identity, right? So this, when you talk about zero trust, it's always about identity-aware application access, right? So now before you grant application access, which is on the far right here, north-south, right? Secure the access. You will authenticate the user, right? And then once the user is authenticated, they are in the environment, then you want to secure the network, right? So now how do I know the application the user use is actually secure, right? It doesn't go east-west. So that means from, let's say you access service on server 1, right? And if, server 1 it's infected by, malware, the blast radius will not infect 200 other servers in the environment, right? So you have to secure the east-west. That's the whole meaning of east-west, right? So let's look into the north-south component and the identity component here, right? So on the top right here, you have your users. It could be contractors, it could be your staff, it could be, anyone, right? Anyone that uses your service. And then of course, being the internet, you would have threat actors here and unauthorized users as well, who is opportunistic, right? Maybe they just want to authenticate and see if they can get access, right? So the first thing is definitely, the edge, right? So remember the Sassy architecture, right? You have the edge. So that's Akamai's edge. That's our 25,000 servers in India, if you're accessing from India, right? And then the first layer is the access layer. So what that is, if I'm a user here, let's say I'm a contractor working for your company, right? I will need to access one of your service, right? Then I will have to authenticate, right? So I'll have to have the right credential to get authenticated, and then I have to have the right access. We call that the authorization. So I have to authenticate, and I have to have the right authorization to access that particular application. Of course, during this process, you can elevate the security. For example, right? Normally, I log in from Melbourne in Australia, right? Suddenly, you see me logging in from somewhere else. You may want to elevate the security, saying that, hey, Johnny normally logs in from this location. Now he logs in from Singapore, right? I'm going to throw out multi-factor authentication just to be sure, right? So you can do things like that with Akamai too. We can do MFA, right? So that's the access component. So once you check the access, right, you say, okay, cool. Now Johnny have access to the environment. Let's make sure the connection is secure, right? So then you secure that particular endpoint from web attack, right? So for example, if if for whatever reason, the machine I use, the BYO device that I use, has got some sort of malicious script running, right? And then it starts firing some sort of SQL injection, or it starts firing some sort of DDoS attack on the application layer, like establishing multiple packet, sending out of sequence packet, right? So the security service should pick that up and start protecting your website from attacks like that. Right, could be anything, could be command injection, could be bots, right? Or even during the point of authentication, right? This threat actor here, or it could be a bot in this example here. It may just be attempting login multiple times. The security layer will take care of that. Will make sure that it doesn't overwhelm the service, right? And stop all the bad bots from authenticating on your website. Of course, the last layer is performance, right? So as much as we like security, so a lot of people say security is a performance tax, right? Like how much are you willing to sacrifice, right? We're aware of this, right? Every time you turn on some sort of security measure, security control, it impacts performance. So built into the platform is also a performance enhancement mechanism, right? For example, at the very basic, caching, right? Caching will just make things a lot faster, very quickly. Right, so those are the things that we do within the cloud itself. And then it gives you, the benefit that it gives you like consistent user experience. You can kind of have a edge logic, right? For example, you can say, okay, the logic I mentioned earlier, like Johnny comes from Melbourne normally, suddenly he comes from Sydney or Singapore. Let's do MFA, right? Or you could say, I want to do a redirect. If the user's contractor, accessing contractor URLs, right, I'm going to redirect them somewhere else, right, for maintenance. So you can apply that blue-green, that logic, right? Just, those edge logic, it's just generally what it is a programmable edge, right? And then of course you have that web application firewall to protect all your enterprise application to make sure that they're secure and safe from all the attacks, right? And then what else do we do, right? So it detects against threat against application, right? And then you enforce authentication and authorization. All right. Why is this beneficial, right? A lot of people ask, why do you have to do that on Akamai, right? What's the benefit of doing it there? Why don't you just leave it to your IDP, like here, this IDP, and leave it to them, right? The reason is simple, right? So if we can pre-authenticate the user, if we can kind of like, think about proxy, we authenticate first. Once it is successful, then we allow the connection through, right? So that will then protect your identity provider from being, especially when it comes to bot attack, right? So we release reports about bots quite frequently. So you can see every time a bot attack on the authentication endpoint, it is really heavy. A lot of time it brings it down. Best case scenario, it just locks out your users from accessing the platform, right? And then the other things you can do, I mentioned earlier, is to have that, MFA, multi-factor authentication, right? Or passwordless authentication, right? So WebAuthn, right? This is becoming very popular now, right? Like password is the weakest point for a lot of things, right? Like a lot of people have this anti-password behavior, just for example, sharing password across multiple sites, I'm a guilt for doing that at times, because I have a spreadsheet with all my password. I use password manager, right? And I have 20 different, like 20, like minimum, right? 20 different passwords that I use on daily basis, right? If I look at my list, it's more than 200 in there, right? So it is really a bad practice to use password, right? So that's where passwordless technology comes in. Right, so it's FIDO. It's if you read about FIDO Alliance, right? It's an alliance. You can go read about WebAuthn, right? We can actually help you get there, right? So we do MFA, and our MFA is FIDO 2 certified. That means it's not phishable. So the other thing is we are agnostic to the data center. So if you look at the diagram earlier, right, you could have AWS, Azure, or it could be on-prem DC. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter, right? It can be anywhere, right? We also reduce the attack surface. So what it means is if you think about this application here, so this could be your maybe leave application, leave application, right? So you want to apply for leave for the year end. So you're going to log in and then request for your time off, right? So what you can do back in the days is you can either publish that to the internet, you open up port 443, you say, okay, I'm going to open up port 443, I'm going to use my IDP to authenticate, I'm going to have a firewall to defend against that, right? The architecture here for Akamai is a bit different for our north-south, right? What we do is we do a dial out only, right? So what that means is on the firewall, the only port you need is, let's say this is a web application, right? It's port 443 outbound, right, to Akamai, right? So all your firewall need to do, if you want to do ACL, is say, I'm going to do allow app to Akamai, port 443. That's it, right? Akamai will take care of the rest. If the user comes in with any other ports, SSH, and if they're not authorized to use SSH, we'll drop it, right? If the user comes in with 443 but wrong credential, we'll drop it on the edge. So you can imagine the load on the firewall would be much lower, right? And we'll only stitch that connection once they're successful authenticated, the security checks pass, right? And then we'll stitch that particular connection, right? So if you look at this, that also means now you don't even need a fixed IP. You can use dynamic IP because this is a dial-out technology, right? So you truly reduce your attack surface, right? I like to say by disappearing from the internet, right? Now you just go dynamic IP, you rotate your IP all the time. It doesn't matter, right? So you are now a moving target to the threat actor or to the unauthorized user. You become a moving target, right? And of course, you don't only have one app, right? You could have multiple apps, right? So you can get that single sign-on experience as well with the north-south. All right, and then if we look further within the data center or within the PaaS platform, right? Then you have this so-called east-west protection that I mentioned earlier, right? So Akamai did a recent acquisition of a company called Guardicore. What they specialize in is really to protect that east-west, right? So that means, like if you look at this color here, the yellow can access yellow, blue can access blue, right? But if I use, if I use red, here, and I'm this user here, right? I don't have access to server number 2, right? It will block it, right? So so this can be done not at only host level, we can also do it at process level. So that means, I could run multiple process on my laptop. Certain process, like this blue process, can access this particular server, but this yellow process cannot access this blue server, right? So we go to the granularity of the process level. The beauty of this is, eventually where we want to get to is, if let's say I access an app, the HR or the Leaf application that I mentioned earlier, and then suddenly, for whatever reason, you see me starting to access sideways. I start to access HR, finance, things that I don't have access to, right? The east-west will pick it up and block this kind of access, right? So what it means is if I get infected by malware, right, my blast radius is much smaller, right? The blast radius is just within that contained space, right? That's it. So that's what we do with east-west, right? So now we have the north-south and east-west, right? So getting back to this Sassy, right? So if you think about Sassy, right? If you look at that diagram that I showed earlier, and even this diagram, there is a lot of services, right? Where we see this going is really a convergence of security, SD-WAN, network plus security. It's really a convergence of all this, right? It's also like, you also want to have some sort of centralized policy so that you can manage everything, right? And then, it has to be delivered as a service, as mentioned earlier, right? So what this means is, is quite, I think you do the poll question. I don't have visibility, but maybe Aparna can read it out, like how many percent says what, right? But I would assume that not like, I don't have to assume. I know that not every vendor would have everything all at once, right? So it is going to be a journey, right? So I don't know how long the journey is going to be. It's going to take probably a couple of years, right? But let's see, right? So Aparna, do you have the poll result? Are you able to quickly talk
Yeah,
through?
sure,
Yeah.
Johnny. We can share that just a second.
Okay, cool. It'll be interesting to see what people think, right? So let me look here.
Are you able to see the results?
Yes, I can. Is it question number 3?
All three questions actually are
Okay.
showing now.
Okay. Oh, it's very hard to see on my screen, but that's okay. We can do Q&A later on, right? And then we'll take a look closer at the poll, right? But
Yeah, sure.
I don't think anyone will expect one vendor to do everything, right? It's going to be a really challenging thing. So what we do is, our vision of this whole SASE ecosystem is, we will provide that so-called orchestration layer, right? So what it means is now you can have all this SDP, traffic shaping, secure web gateway, right? That could be from Akamai, that could be from someone else. You could have SD-WAN from your Cisco, and you could have firewall from your favorite vendor, right? Or Quas, or IDP. Like it can be from anyone. So what we do is we will provide you the orchestration layer. So that means you can use our technology, like our vision. This is our vision, right? I'm talking about vision here in future, right? You can use this technology in conjunction with other vendors to provide a SASE service, right? So Akamai becomes a multi-tenant microservices platform, right? And because of that, you have a holistic visibility and policy management, right? That you can use, right, to manage the user, right? Because Akamai, let's say we don't do SDP today, right? So you can use third-party vendor to do SDP, right? But you incorporate their so-called information, right, for that software-defined perimeter into our reporting so that we know, okay, this user is accessing from this particular segment, let's say, right? And things like that. You can also do third-party integration, like API integration with third-party, right? Or natively run the service on us, right? Based on signal ingestion. So it's a, we think that this is a truly powerful platform that you can use to orchestrate and get to your Sassy vision much quicker than waiting for the vendor to consolidate everything, because it's just quite impossible. There's a lot of technology here, and they're not really adjacent technology. They are different technology altogether, right? So this is how it looks like from our perspective. So in orange here is something that we do today, right? The zero trust that I just covered earlier, right? And then we do micro segmentation for the east-west, right? We do DLP. We can help you do MFA if you need to, multi-factor authentication for the users, right? We can also do secure web gateway, and then of course DNS firewall and web application firewall, or the web firewall. We can do that, right? But for function like CASB or firewall as a service or remote browser isolation or your cloud security posture manager or SD-WAN, right? For your, for linking your offices, right? You can use third party, and then it goes to our orchestration or programmable edge here. We call that the orchestration layer, right? And that layer can be used like like a single pane of glass, so that you can look at everything that's going on in your network, right? Yep. So again, right, I'll build this up quickly and park it here, right? So we, again, the three things that I mentioned earlier, the three pillars: identity aware, right? So we can help with a phish-proof multi-factor authentication. For application you own, right? For north-south, right? For things like Leaf application access, all those apps that I mentioned earlier, right? You can definitely secure it using the zero trust manner. So instead of using VPN, where trust is established based on the authentication layer, right? Now you establish trust based on the user and also the app access, right? So you have the notion of least privilege. Of course, you can accelerate that using application acceleration, things like caching, path selection, and things like that. And then DNS protection as well. So DNS is something that people overlook all the time, right? But DNS is actually really critical, right? Because in the recent attack that we actually help our customer defend, right, we see that the attacks start morphing from web, and then they start hitting the DNS, because attacker knows that DNS normally are not scaled to that kind of throughput, right? And then of course it's DDoS protection, web application firewall, and that's what you can do for application that you own, right? And also bot management, right? So for bot management is especially useful if you have endpoint, like login endpoint, right? That your credential endpoint, right? And also this script protection, right? For example, you may roll out multiple apps. You have all these very aggressive app rollout in your environment, right? So your developer may consume script from third party, right? So what we can do is can help you check to make sure that the script has got no malicious, it's not running anything malicious, right? So what we've seen with some scripts is they actually start exfiltrating data within the browser itself, right? And they do that by inserting this malicious script. So what we'll do is we pick up the script, and then we can actually block it if you need to. For application that you do not own, right? So for example, if you go to Facebook, if you go to Google, things like that, we can help you with resolver DNS protection. So what we can, like let's say you go to malware site or any site that's you're not supposed to be at, right? We can help you with the DNS level, at the DNS level as well. And then we can also do secure web gateway. So for example, if you want to, access your, you may subscribe to third-party service, you want to access your site, right? But you want to secure it, so we can also have a secure web gateway to help you do that, and couple that with antivirus, DLP, a cloud sandbox, and also application control, right? So that's our North-South suite. It covers application that you own and application that you do not own. And then of course the East-West, where our recent acquisition, where with Guardicore, we can help you secure, right? Once your user gets in, right? We can contain the blast radius, right? And make sure they do not have over provision privilege. All right, I'm gonna stop here, right? And then we'll open up for question.
So Johnny, I see a few questions that have come in. Sorry, Vikas, please go ahead.
No, I was saying that there were some questions on Q&A that team has already answered. So
Okay.
is there any space? Yeah, so I think team is answering the questions on the Q&A tab. But if somebody wants to ask live question, guys, please raise your hand. Can you raise that option available in WebEx? I'm not sure. So if you want to ask live question, maybe Aparna can unmute you, put your, that you want to ask question on chat, and then we will unmute you. Let me
There is one question that I've received privately, Vikas and Johnny. So the question is, can you please explain fish-proof MFA?
Awesome.
Johnny, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So, so I think when we talk about MFA, there's a lot of MFA, right? If you think about MFA, the most common MFA is really SMS based, right? The one that is coming up more and more today is you can do multi-factor authentication through email. So when you log in, you can say send me a code, and then that code could come through your SMS or your email, right? Or you could use app like Google Authenticator, app like that, right? To do multi-factor authentication. The problem with that kind of app, right, is it is not, if someone sit in the middle, right? So let's say if I try to log into my service and then someone send me a code on my mobile phone here, right? So the service send me a code, a 6-digit code. That's very common, right? And then if I key in that code, I get through, correct? So that's a normal behavior, right? As a user, what I need to do is to make sure that the domain I visit is actually the domain I want to go to, right? So for example, I go to my bank.com.au, right? So bank1.com.au, let's say, right? And then I need to make sure that that's actually my bank. So if someone do phishing for whatever reason, so the most common one that I constantly get, right? Every time I run session like this, I get phished all the time. I don't know why. But anyway, that aside, right? The most common one I get is Johnny. We notice, you have changed your address. Can you verify this, right? Or we notice you just spent like $50 on this site. Can you verify this? And if I click on the link, instead of bank one, it's bank I. It looks the same, but if I actually went to my detonation server. I've got something that I run on the site, right, and visit that link. It looks exactly the same as the bank. It's a complete replica. So let's say I'm not sharp enough, which is quite common. Not everyone's that sharp. You haven't I haven't had my coffee. I don't look at I or one. It looks like the same to me because the website looks the same, the message looks the same, right? So I click on that and I enter my username and password. The site that fished me will collect my username and password and replay it to my actual banking site. And then when the actual banking site requests for the second factor of, guess what? They'll request from me, and I'll punch in that fish site. Now my credential is totally stolen, right? Now, because that's what we call phishing, right? So if you want to read more about this, go read the Twitter investigation report. It's public. Just like Twitter investigation report, happens the same way. They had issue with VPN. Someone pretend to be help desk, call the user, right? And a few user actually gave their 2FA, right? And then the person who fished, the fraudster, actually managed to hijack the account, right? What fish-proof MFA is really a cryptographically secure MFA standard, right? So if you go to FIDO Alliance, right, or I can quickly explain here, right, is, for example, if I request for MFA, right, it will check for proof of possession. Make sure Johnny is on the other side of the screen. How do I do that? I'll make sure that he has his phone with him, right? So we have a plugin built in the browser. It detects that, right? And then I say approve, right? And then I go through. before the approved screen can be presented to me as a user, right, it will check for the domain. The technology check for the domain. It checks for I versus 1, right? For example, bank I and bank 1 is two different things altogether, and it's cryptographically secure, right? So it doesn't match, right? So what that means is now if someone try to hijack by doing bank I instead of bank 1, right, now it picks up, it won't even prompt me for MFA, right? So what you do is you leave that decision to technology, right? So even though I haven't had coffee, I can just, whatever, I just go to that fish site, the prompt won't even come to me, right? So that's fish-proof MFA, generally a cryptographically secure MFA.
Great answer, Johnny.
Yeah.
I think there is
Rajesh?
one more question in the Q&A tab. If you can take a look.
Yeah, so Rajesh asked a question, right? So if company use shortened URL, how can that's a problem, right? Now, if you use shortened URL, how are you gonna pick it up, right? I have to click on it first. By the time you click on it, it will detonate, right? So if it's a malicious site, it'll start detonating. You may have malware installed by then, right? So what a fish-proof MFA do? It doesn't matter. You can click on this, right? If it's a not legitimate site, right, it will not even challenge you for second factor. It won't happen, right? Because the MFA service will verify on behalf. I hope that's clear, right? Because, if it doesn't match, it doesn't match. If the URL doesn't match, the technology picks it up. I don't have to do it as a person.
Cool.
Vivek asks if MFA is part of identity and access management. It is normally used in conjunction, right? So what that means is you may have IAM, right? Or you may have IAM with people like Ping, Okta, whoever, right? Or even Active Directory, Azure AD, doesn't matter, right? So MFA is normally used in conjunction with an IDP, right? So we enrich it. What other things we can do, right? So, for some of our customer, what we do is on the security side of things, we provide contextual information to the IDP, right? So for example, if Johnny comes in and he doesn't look like a human, right? So that connection is using Johnny's credential and password, right? But there's no human interaction behind the screen. So we do detection like that, behavior-based detection, right? We can then actually notify through a header of some sort the IDP. The IDP then challenge and say, okay, because there's no human presence or behavior presence, right, I'm going to challenge this particular connection with MFA, right? So it is generally a really tight-knit MFA and the IDP, right? So we work with most of the IDP out there. Do you cover PIM, Patch Integrity Manager? Yes, we cover. Is that what you mean? Sorry if I butcher your name. It's Charanjit. Is that what you mean? Patch PIM? Can you maybe elaborate what PIM is? If you're talking about Akamai PIM, yes, we do PIM. We can definitely have a separate session to talk about that because it's gonna take forever. It's a big topic by itself.
So Johnny, he has messaged separately that that's what he means, page integrity manager.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, we do PIM. But we can always take that separately because it's gonna take a while to explain PIM.
Great. I don't see any more questions. We have enough time. So let me ask this question. Can you share more details around the bot management solution that you have? Let's say you have a API endpoint and you are getting a lot of credential stuffing attacks, right? User ID and password. Thousands of them are coming per second, let's say. And you have done rate limiting, you have done geo blocking, you have put in CAPTCHA. Now what? What else can we do with Akamai bot solution?
Yeah. So when you think about this endpoint, right? It can be any endpoint. It could be one of the endpoint that I see commonly attacked is also your so-called staff login endpoint, right? That username, that endpoint, that authentication endpoint that you log into every morning, right? So what we can do is instead of, CAPTCHA is, yes, you can do CAPTCHA, but what we can do on top of that is, we extend that to behavior based, right? By turning on behavior based, right? We look at the presence of a human, mouse movement, keystroke behind the screen, right? We take that in, and then if that movement or that so-called behavior is present, you can then, if you can go one step further by verifying, is this behavior the same as Johnny's previous behavior, right? So you can do things like that, right? Or sometimes customer just say, let's do MFA. Let's do MFA at point of entry. And a lot of time when you do MFA at point of entry, this is especially useful because when it comes to your workforce, right? You can kind of afford friction, right? When it comes to consumer, a lot of time friction is a problem, right? But when it comes to workforce, people assessing your staff, assessing your environment, your contractor assessing your environment, you can afford a bit of friction. So MFA is friction, it slows things down, right? So then
That's
what
right.
I suggest for, like your so-called enterprise app is really to apply MFA everywhere on point of entry, right? And then maybe you can do risk-based MFA if you want to, right? But you can always do it at point of entry. That would help.
Right. I mean, it is more specific to consumers, let's say, and around a mobile API endpoint, right? Not the website where you put login ID and password. So even on mobile applications, can you do behavioral based assessment and
Yeah,
throw a
you
challenge
can. You
according to
can.
that?
That's a large topic by itself. We can do that for sure. It's as part of SDK, right? So definitely.
Cool, cool. So
Yeah.
great. More questions are coming on chat. We have probably 2, 3 more minutes we can take. I think good 5 more minutes we can take Q&A. So
Pawan have a
Pawan,
question on
question, great.
Guardicore. So Pawan, I think we have a session on Guardicore coming out. Stay tuned, right? It'll be really interesting. Hang on there. So ask during the Guardicore session. Is phishing email will provide the authentication factor like OTP sent to a different device? Okay. Is phishing email? Okay. I'm trying to understand the question here, Vivek. So are you saying that will provide authentication factor like OTP?
I think it is around fish proof MFA that you talked about earlier, maybe related to that,
Yeah.
but it's not clear.
Yeah, so fish can come in many ways. So email is one of them. SMS is very common, right? Fish can also come as advertisement on your site. So for example, click on this link and then actually it's not that actual link, right? It's actually a fish link, right? So there's a lot of way to do fish, right? So definitely multiple method, right? But if you have a fish-proof MFA, it doesn't matter how you get fish, right? Because by the time when you authenticate and the MFA kicks in, the MFA service will verify whether the link is actually a fish or not, right? Whether the domain is actually the domain you're visiting, right? Don't forget, right? It's cryptographically secure. Think about TLS, but two ways, right? So now if I think about TLS, I go to www.google.com. I see a security key. Right now, the service also verify me. So I'll have my own private key. So it is a two-way TLS.
Awesome, sounds good. And to Pawan's question, Pawan Bhai, we did a webinar with Guardicore, I think 2 weeks back, and the recording is available on EliteCISOs website. So you can review that as well.
Cool.
Great.
Or you can reach out to
No,
us. We'll help you answer that. I just want to make sure we stick on the topic.
great. So there are no more questions, I believe. That's about it. Let me share my screen again. I don't have permission, I believe. Aparna, can you enable access for me? I still can't do it.
Just a moment, Vikas, just 1 second.
Sure.
Now, can you check?
Yeah, now I can do it. So let me share my screen and make some closing notes. Let me know when you see my screen, please.
It's coming up,
Yes.
Vikas.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Great, guys. So overall, great session, Johnny. Thanks a lot. This is just a closing comments that we do in every session. So guys, thanks for joining the session. If you want your participation certificate, which looks like this, what you can do is go to EliteCISOs website, click on events, click on upcoming events, and then click on CPA certificate. Once you click on it, you will go to a Google form. Put your email address here where you want your certificate, put your full name, and the password to download the certificate is Windows. Okay. Why Windows? Because yesterday, 10th of November 1983, Microsoft introduced Windows for the very first time that most of us are using. Okay, guys. So what you got to do is put Windows, and then the certificate will come over your email like this. And then once you are here, you would see that next week we have a session with Sophos, but the registration link is not working. This is deliberate because we want you guys to use one-click registration that you guys use to register for Akamai webinar as well. So the invite will come over email. You will just click on a link and boom, you are registered. You don't have to fill any of this, right? So you don't have to fill any form. Just click on the link and you will be registered for the session next week, right? If you are not in the Elite CISOs email list, what you can do is, if you are a CIO or CISO, you can go to the membership link and then you can apply for a Elite CISO membership. But if you are not CIO CISO and you still want to receive Elite CISOs communication, you want to participate in the events that we do, you can go ahead to subscribe and then fill this form. Once you fill this form, you will receive all the invites, all the information over your email. Great. So last but not the least that everybody is kind of waiting for, and Johnny, sorry, you are not in this list of 335 people because you did not register. So out of 335, I believe we have 160 people joining in today. So half of the people are already gone. Rest half, good luck to you guys. I'll spin it. Hopefully your name will come in a single spin. If it does not come, I will try a couple of more spins. Okay. And if your name comes, go to the chat and say, yes, you are in this session. With this, good luck, everyone. I'm going to spin it now. Okay, Mr. Narendra Deshpande from KSB Limited. If you are in the session, go to the chat and say yes. Aparna, can you please monitor the chat for me if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure, Vikas.
I don't recall this name, so I'm not sure whether Mr. Narendra would have joined or not. So if there is no response in chat as yet, I'm going to spin it again. And Mr. Robin Smith from Aston Martin. So Robin recently joined. He's based out of UK. He's a CISO for Aston Martin. Guys, amazing. It'll be really good to see if Robin is here.
Doesn't look like he's joined today, Vikas.
Okay, great. I will spin it again. This is the last time I'm spinning. Otherwise, I will keep the smartwatch then. Manu Bhatia, my very good friend, very fit individual, member for our fitness group as well. Manu Bhai, are you there? Go to the chat and say yes. I will hate it if you are not there. I don't see any yes coming in. What should I do? Should I spin it one more time or I should keep the watch? Or maybe we can give it to Johnny. Why not?
Spin the
Yeah.
Okay.
Chat responses are saying spin.
Okay, I'll spin it one more time. We still have time. We still have 4 minutes. Mr. Bala from Novak Technology. I don't think Mr. Bala would be there because this name doesn't sound too familiar to me. Okay, guys, I've run it 4 times. I'm going to run it one last time, which is the 5th one. If it does not come, we will send it to Johnny. Okay, I'm spinning it now.
Johnny, your luck versus everyone else.
Lucas L from Matrix team. I still don't see any yes on the chat. So hard luck, guys. I'm sorry. I believe Amazon works in Australia, so we will send it.
Oh, no.
Keep spinning. Come on, guys. I can't keep doing it.
So I'll drop me a mail or LinkedIn or whatever, right? Feedback, and then I'll pick one. How about that?
Awesome. That will be great. Yeah. Okay, guys, that's about it. I'm not spinning it anymore. I've ran it 5 times, but we cannot just keep running it. With this, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining the session. And Okay, people are saying spin once more. Okay, so I'm spinning it just one more time. Okay, because it is 11:57. Johnny,
Okay.
keep your fingers crossed. Okay. Okay, let's see. Sandesh Govalkar, CISO of Angel Broking from Mumbai. Sandesh bhai, you.
There.
Oh, wow, gone. Very nice. Sandesh
Congrats,
bhai.
Oh, there you go.
Awesome. Congrats. Hard luck, Johnny. Maybe next time. But it's been a fun session. Great insights, Johnny. And thanks everyone for joining in. And Sandesh bhai, DM me on WhatsApp and share your address. We will send the watch. Great. With this, bye everyone. Thanks for joining. See you guys next week.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for joining in. Because there's a short survey that comes up at the end. If folks can give us their feedback, that'd be great.
That will be great, guys. Yeah, so there's a short feedback form or a survey coming up. Please do participate in that as well. Thank you.